Welcome to Tony Unleashed, the podcast where we unleash the truth about all things pets.
Our research and anecdotal evidence matched with pet expert interviews will help you help your pet thrive.
We are here to answer questions, divulge information, and spread awareness about what's really going on in the world of pets.
I am your co-host, Emily Taylor, pet nutrition enthusiast.
And I'm Tony Shalasky, owner of Healthy Pet Products with 3 locations in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and recently expanded to Port Charlotte, Florida.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome back to Tony Unleashed, the podcast. Today we've got a really special guest, Jaron Lucas, who's the brains behind a fascinating book about the world of fats and how they impact our pets. We're diving headfirst into a topic that's near and dear to every dog parent's heart, and that's what goes into our pets' food. And what's pretty awesome is not only does Jaron have a book, but he also has a food and a personal journey. So Jaron, welcome to Tony Unleashed.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. Glad to be here and chat about fats and how to help our dogs live longer.
Awesome. So me with Lyme disease and my own personal journey, I would really like to hear a little bit, and I think our listeners would too, to hear a little bit about your personal journey, because I know that's what led into your book and your food.
Yeah, my journey is similar to many people, it seems, which is I learned maybe like 5 years ago that all of my skin allergies are actually food allergies. So doctors had been shooting me up with worse and worse corticosteroids, which worked great for a bit until they stopped working like 6 months later. And then your symptoms come back 10 times worse than before. So I got to this point where basically I had sold a tech company, and I then spent this year in meditation, and I came out on the other side of it saying, I want to do something that's going to have a positive, tangible impact on the world. And meanwhile, with learning about all of my food allergies, I'm a bit of a like data science nerd. So it led me on this deep dive of 3,000 clinical studies where I was looking specifically at what ingredients are tied to positive health outcomes in dogs. And that's like really what my book, The Canine Cocomega Effect, talks about. In particular, I ended up coming upon some really interesting studies around fats in particular. So my book really focuses on fats. I think that they are really the underappreciated macronutrient. You know, we talk a lot about proteins a lot of times because like dogs are allergic to certain proteins, and proteins, of course, are pretty important. We talk about keeping things low carb, but you know, people never really talk about fats, and yet, right, you know, seed oils are like super prevalent in pet food, and there are lots of other interesting aspects that I'm sure we'll talk about throughout this conversation.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely. I think fats are so very important, and they have kind of a bad name, especially with how much we hear about pancreatitis. And then dogs are always put on a low-fat food, and that's not good long-term.
Yeah, it is. The pancreatitis issue seems to be a growing one in dogs. And I think people are, you know, there really isn't that much research about it, right? It's like dogs definitely are having issues with certain fats. Certain dogs are having issues with certain fats. So obviously like schnauzers tend to be very prone to pancreatitis, but there's so much more that goes into it. Like one thing, and you know, that I'll even mention is you hear a lot of stories about dogs eating trash and then getting pancreatitis. Like that isn't really that much of a fat related issue. So it tells you that there's maybe like more to the story. Definitely fats play a role, but what I think many people haven't considered is which type of fats are causing pancreatitis. Like, is it animal fats, which dogs ate for millions of years without problem? Is it like potentially the seed oils that have grown in pet food for 80 years and like continues to grow because it's such a cheap ingredient and it's very hard to meet AAFCO omega-6 guidelines without seed oils if you're not using a lot of real meat. So there's a lot to the story, but yeah, I definitely think that just like the whole DCM heart issue, people see a headline and then they take the most simplistic takeaway from it, which is usually not really that correct.
Correct. So, and I think, so let's get into like the omega-3 compared to omega-6, because I think the average listener and customer these days does understand that we're overloaded with omega-6, right? So let's get into that a little more and how we can increase the omega-3s to get what's the right balance, I guess. How can we get it balanced?
Yeah, what a great question, because that is, I think, the most important, just easy to fix part of our dog's diet. So to put things in perspective, the average like fresh kind of healthy dog food is going to have a 1-to-6 omega-3 ratio, omega-3 to 6 ratio. So that means that there are for every like 6 inflammatory molecules, there's 1 anti-inflammatory molecule. Pretty inflammatory diet is what I'm trying to say. Usually in human nutrition, people are recommended a 1-to-1 omega-3 to 6 ratio. Even higher, sometimes like a 2-to-1 omega-3 to 6 ratio. So we're beginning with like a lot of the higher end brands having like a pretty bad start, again, 1-to-6. Now your average dry kibble, that's going to be a 1-to-16 omega-3 to 6 ratio, which is the same as American fast food like McDonald's. So very, very inflammatory diet, and AAFCO's requirements are actually even worse. They're 1-to-30. God forbid any dog eat that diet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it makes me sad too. So I think what I'm really trying to help pet parents understand is like, we got to get that omega-3 to 6 ratio at 1-to-1, and you don't have to use Yum Wolf products to do it. You can use any wild Alaskan salmon oil, or you can use cod liver oil, and just even adding 2% of your dog, making 2% of your dog's diet one of these fish oils is going to get you to those levels, and they're going to have an anti-inflammatory diet from a fat perspective. Now, that's just the beginning of the story. There are other things that can cause inflammation. So, when thinking about the lessons that I take away in my book, the whole story begins with, I have a whole title that's called "Stop Feeding Your Dog Dry Kibble," and that is, I'll talk to people whose dogs are having all sorts of crazy allergies or inflammation, and I'll ask what they're eating, and more often than not, it's dry kibble. Now, those are the like quickest, fastest, easiest success stories. Like if someone's coming off of fresh food, it's a little more complicated. You have to look at like ingredients, you have to look at lots of other things. But when it's dry kibble, it's just absolutely astonishing how like everyone's dog gets healthier after 3 weeks off of it. Now I asked myself, why is this? Because a lot of us know that dry kibble is highly processed. A lot of us know that it's cooked at high heat, high temperature, high pressure, through a grinding machine called the hot extruder that actually degrades nutrients on the, kind of like the microscopic level.
Yep, it does.
Now, what a lot of people maybe don't realize, and it took me 2 years in the industry to realize it myself, is this whole like high heat, high pressure cooking method is oxidizing all the fats, turning them into free radicals. So like, fats are a pretty large percentage of a dog food, right? Like even a low fat diet's 13%, let's call it. But like most dog food is going to be like 20-25% fat, maybe 30. So, okay, we're taking all those fats and then we're oxidizing all of them and feeding them to our dog every day. And it's no wonder why they are having all of these inflammatory health issues. So the first step is very simple. It's to stop feeding our dogs dry kibble. And I really try to convince people because, people people don't want to hear that sometimes,
Yep.
definitely dry kibble is cheaper. There's a reason for that. But, a lot of people maybe like have a hard time convincing themselves that, okay, well, like spending even like just $20 a month more on my dog's food will result in like very tangible health benefits. Like some people get so into the cost optimization game, and I get it. Like, it's tough times for a lot of people out there, but
Yeah.
if we take a long-term perspective, like
Yep.
what else do we spend $20 a month on? How much in vet bills are we going to save? And
Yep.
so getting rid of the hot extrusion cooking method from our dog's diet, that is going to be the first step in making sure that we don't have a lot of free radicals in their diet. And that is the number one most important step that we can take.
Yeah.
After that, we can start to look at fats. So like, it won't surprise a lot of people listening to learn that my research found that seed oils were not the ideal fat to feed our dogs for longevity. So when we looked at all of these microbiome studies, seed oils, which are very high in omega-6, pro-inflammatory omega-6, also oxidize very easily, especially when we're comparing that to something like animal fats. So, just bringing our dog's diet back to its kind of like ancestral nature, looking, taking clues from that, and then trying to just cook it at very low heat. That's another thing where, like, if we can keep our cooking temps below, let's call it like 175 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
that really is going to help prevent a lot of these health issues related to inflammation from occurring.
So everything you're saying is truly what I mean. You already know this. You're preaching to the choir, because with me having retail stores, we stress this every day to customers, and we see it. They're like, "What do you mean we should feed less kibble? What do you mean we should feed fresh? What do you mean it's okay to feed table scraps?" Because I do tell people, if you home cook and you've got fresh cuttings or leftover eggs or whatever, good healthy foods, that you can keep an extra container in your fridge and incorporate that as your dog's diet. So reduce that kibble as much as you possibly can. Drink 3 less lattes a month. Drink, eliminate that one Starbucks trip. So it adds up, and you do end up saving in vet bills. So we talk about this every day. And so seed oils, that's sunflower oil, right? What else? Is canola oil considered a seed oil? I mean, I don't like canola oil, period, yeah. But that is a big one.
That's the worst seed oil.
It is the worst. So it's also the extraction they use too, right? That is a problem.
Yeah, so
the process.
Seed oils are sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil are the major ones, and then you can produce them in different ways. So some can be like expeller press is something that is going to be the most gentle way of producing a seed oil. Doesn't mean it's good for your dog. It just means that it's like probably not like heavily oxidized. Canola oil is the worst because that goes through a 12-step manufacturing process. Imagine taking a liquid and then putting chemicals into it so that like that causes certain chemical reactions so that they can then separate like the oil from these solids. There's like a whole sludge that emerges from this whole like process of creating canola oil. I mean, 12 steps. Like you can, I actually encourage anyone listening to go on YouTube and find a video of how canola oil is made. It's actually pretty entertaining. And also like you just never want to eat canola oil again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But it's the cheapest. It's, you really only find it in the worst brands. That's why I think it's so funny that people are like such strong proponents of Purina One, because, it's like, that's one of the few brands that will actually use canola oil. Most brands have elevated beyond that, but in the very cheap dog food, that's the seed oil you'll find. And then, kind of like emerging beyond that, very, very common. You're going to find the like sunflower oil, the safflower oil. But the problem with those is that, you know, even if you're not using dry kibble, like let's say you're just like fresh cooking the food, like those fats will still oxidize very easily. So, and they're pro-inflammatory. So, you know, a lot of people hear that, like they hear the phrase pro-inflammatory, and they think to themselves like, oh, that's like woo-woo nonsense. Like there's no scientific proof behind it. There is scientific proof. And I have a whole chart in my book showing basically the biochemical pathways that happen when we feed our dogs omega-3 versus omega-6. And then also how if we add coconut oil to the omega-3 side, how that actually produces additional kind of like anti-inflammatory benefits. It has these synergistic properties. And that's like one of the core takeaways of my book is I've called it the Cocomega Effect. And it just shows how basically adding 1% of our, making 1% of our dog's diet coconut oil, very small amount, and then also like having that within a certain ratio of omega-3s were shown in all these clinical studies over the last 5 years to produce extra microbiome diversity, which is a stat that's across the board associated with longevity, as well as additional anti-inflammatory effects within the body, like more than what omega-3 provided on its own, more than what coconut oil provided on its own. Both are anti-inflammatory in these studies, but it was like a really interesting combination.
I give my rescue puppy a lick right on the spoon. She gets a little teaspoon and she loves it. And it's also great to use as a toothpaste. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I've even been doing that. There's this like ancient Ayurvedic technique where you will just like take a teaspoon of coconut oil and kind of like swish it around until it basically like the lauric acid will help reduce bad bacteria in your mouth. And that's actually part of what caused, you know, there are like two important parts of coconut oil. There's the MCTs and the lauric acid. So to be totally honest, like the palmitic acid part is like not super beneficial for any reason.
Okay.
You know, if you can find, it's not, I mean, at 1% of your dog's diet, you know, basically like the palmitic acid is going to be like half of that. So really not going to have like a super negative effect, but it's really the other two that are like the most important parts. So if you like want to optimize this, finding an MCT oil that contains lauric acid is the way to go. Many do not, because people who are on keto are like, I have nothing to do with lauric acid. Like that doesn't offer me any benefits because it doesn't convert into ketones. But lauric acid has all these other benefits. It basically has a probiotic like effect in the microbiome. So it's doing the same thing kind of as you were saying, you know, you're feeding it to your dog and your dog is getting that benefit in their microbiome too. You know, it's not just the mouth is really just the beginning of the microbiome. So you know, it's helping kind of keep their teeth clean. Of course, like dogs love the taste as well. But as that like keeps going down, it's actually like for whatever reason, lauric acid tends to kill bad bacteria, but then it keeps the good. So it's very cool because then you're essentially opening up space in your dog's microbiome for that to be filled with beneficial bacteria.
Love it. That's so great. Now, you did mention wild salmon oil is another one you like. I sell anchovy and sardine. How do you feel about those?
Those are probably my two favorite fish to feed dogs.
Okay, good.
And sardine is another one where like I often recommend, you know, if you don't want to, you know, maybe let's look at the options for like boosting DHA, which is a type of omega-3 that like is the type people really care about. So you know, you can do the salmon oil. The pros are that it's fairly inexpensive. The con is that it smells awful. Like you'll never want your dog to kiss you ever again, which is very sad, actually.
Yeah.
So they do love the taste, but so if you got a picky eater, it's another benefit. With cod liver oil is a lot more expensive, but it has no smell or taste whatsoever. So like if you want to be able to like give all those same benefits, it's actually better than salmon oil in a lot of ways. Has a lot of like very bioavailable vitamin D as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yeah. So I mean, cod liver oil is like the best. Like our for me, like my great grandparents were right.
Yeah.
People always joke about that with
take
cod
a spoon.
liver oil.
Yep. It's good for us.
Yeah. And then but like, so those are the oil options, but like the most simple one is just like open a can of sardines and give that to your dog as long as it doesn't have anything bad in it. Now you do need to be careful with the sardines. Almost every brand of canned sardines has been found to have, I believe it was arsenic.
Oh, wow. Where, how did you research and figure out how?
Yeah, there was like a big, I think it was like an NIH study that was done on this. And I forget if it was like, I forget where the arsenic was actually coming from. I forget if it's like the canning process or what, but it's something a lot of people are concerned about. In fact, Joe Rogan even talks about how he was eating like 2 cans a day and he was just starting to feel really bad. And he went to the doctor and the doctor said, you have like dangerously incredibly high levels of arsenic in your blood. Out. Yeah. And he stopped eating it like he was and everything got better. But it's not just him. That's just like one example. Like there literally was a study done a year or two ago looking at like Wild Planet and a lot of the really popular brands, and like across the board they like basically all had it. So you definitely want to like keep your dog's dose of canned sardines to like maybe like 3 times a week, probably at most. And you don't have to feed them the whole can either, right? Like 1 can, you could give them like half a sardine and that might kind of last them like 5 days or more. So yeah, that's definitely like the easiest way. Actually, in our new perfect superfood fish recipe, it's all like wild caught fish and we only use anchovies and sardines. So I'm not only a fan, I'm like really a true believer. And those are great because they're also both small fish. Now, one of the benefits to like not having it canned is, like we're able to get it like our manufacturing facility is like right by the ocean. So like this fish is like basically coming fresh fish, straight in from the ocean. And it's really not like getting processed in all the bad ways, like canning. Like I'm starting to learn about how much plastics are even in or canned beverages. I don't know if you just saw about Liquid Death, but kind of like the big
I didn't see Liquid Death.
Yeah, because their whole thing is like that it's environmentally healthy. Love Liquid Death, like they're very cool. But yeah, like I learned that the inside of the cans is actually lined with plastic.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, what? First off, I'm like, why?
Yeah, I did know that.
It seems unnecessary, but
but sardines have short lives, right? So they're in our oceans a short amount of time. So hopefully, I mean, I always equated that to less mercury, less plastic.
And they're at the bottom of the food chain,
right?
That helps a lot because it's like really the predatory fish like tuna that tend to build up a lot of these like heavy metals. Yep.
Now, and beyond canned, like I sell them in the freezer. So your local pet food stores, for our listeners, may have sardines right in the freezer and anchovies right in the freezer. So
I would definitely check out your local pet store first. Support them.
Yep. And then, so this is all like, there's just so much that we could talk for days, I swear. So your personal journey led into the book because you learned everything about foods and how to fix yourself. And you did all this research on the fats. You wrote the book. What came first, the book or the food?
The research all stemmed from the same research, but the food came first. So
Gotcha.
I did all this research. Really, it was a combination of, like you said, I was kind of learning how to fix myself. And so out of personal curiosity, I was just like deep diving into all this research. And then at the same time, I was formulating this first version of our air dried dog food, Perfect Kibble, which was the one we launched in 2020. And, so it was kind of out of interest. I was like really set at that time on creating an air dried dog food. It's just like, kind of like, especially then it was like just when this technology was starting to come out. So yeah, I was working on that. And at some point I was speaking to so many pet parents on calls that I basically said to myself, like, I just need to put all of this knowledge into a book. So yeah, I spent like a long time on that. Anyone who's ever written a book will know that it is a commitment.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's nice because it also helped me like really, people in pet food today, pet parents really want to see evidence. They want to see like the studies. And so probably the biggest reason I wrote the book is because like I wanted something where like I didn't even just want to like create a blog article with like a bunch of links. I wanted to basically say like there are 162 studies in the book. They're all at the end of it. Like if you want to see like the research study and the immense amount of research, and the whole book too is like I'm kind of breaking down the study. So like, not only do I have the sightings at the end, but I'm also throughout the book, I'm just saying like, in 2020, this study happened and this is why it's interesting for your dog. And so that it's really for people who are like trying to figure out how to fix their dog. Again, like I would say that pretty much every health issue is some sort of inflammation.
Totally.
So, people like, if you ever see itis at the end of the word, that means inflammation. So like pancreatitis, a lot of people may not super think about it, but even like, DCM, that was heart inflammation. Thinking about like IBD, these are getting to things that maybe like more and more people know about, but like IBD is obviously like inflammation in the microbiome. Any sort of skin inflammation. And I mentioned earlier on that like, I was having all these skin allergies that turned out to be food allergies, but that was something that really drove me because like when back then and even today, like if I eat things that I'm not supposed to, like I feel it in my skin.
Yeah.
And so like when I'm kind of like working with all of these dogs, I'm not just saying from like a theoretical standpoint, like, okay, you have like itchy skin. That's like really sad. Here's like some products to try. It's more for me like, ooh, I've felt what that dog is feeling, and that is painful.
Yeah.
And so like, here's how I learned to fix it.
And Jaron, they are all so fucking itchy. I mean, I have a manager that she has a doodle. I think she's an Aussie doodle. She's been raw fed, minimally vaccinated, and she, I think, is 5 years old now. And she, out of nowhere, just started itching herself like crazy.
Yeah, that's always a sad one, because then first you got to start to figure out like what's even causing this.
Yeah.
Is it the food? Is it the environment? And that alone is really tough. And a lot of people just like don't even know where to start.
And fortunately, we know where to start, but we all are like dumbfounded. Like, why is this happening to this dog? Because there's no way she's heavy in omega-6s, or her ratio is that far out that she should be reacting this way. And
absolutely,
you know what I mean? So we did the 5-strand test, which I don't know if you're familiar with.
Yeah. What did that show?
everything.
Of course.
So, the list is like pages and pages and pages. But we did switch her to her proteins that are acceptable, which I think are rabbit and salmon. And she's improved. She's been doing great for 6 weeks. I recommended Bragg's apple cider vinegar bath. So we've been drenching her in Bragg's and then giving her a bath with Project Suds shampoo, which is phenomenal. But and she was improving, and then now she's a mess again.
Yeah, that's so sad. And it's like when dogs take those tests, I find that usually they're allergic to everything. So it's like, where do I even begin? I have heard immunotherapy is working for a lot of people. Okay. So that is positive. Like it actually does seem like it works. Of course, that's like, long-term intensive shot therapy and stuff. It's not easy, but
right.
Yeah, it seems to be one of the more effective things, especially when dogs have skin allergies. And yeah, I mean, obviously the first place to start for most people is just looking at the diet and trying to make that as anti-inflammatory as possible, and then from there, it's like it can be kind of like a game of like just figuring out first if it's a food allergy. Like you might like put them on one protein for a bit that's more rare. I was having this conversation yesterday where I guess someone had been recommended beaver meat. I was like, where do you
I know where they can get it. I know where they can get it. I do. What the raw?
At your store?
I don't sell it, but there's a manufacturer. She's a young woman. She's got the craziest proteins. She even has muskrat.
Wow.
And
so does she deal mostly with like dogs with allergies?
Yeah, I mean, she's like, you can't get any more primal than she is. She does very rare protein formulas, raw formulas, and then she's got this list of body parts that's insane, like even kangaroo spine, and she's got all kinds of crazy shit.
She sounds like a really fascinating person.
She's something, and she's out of Ohio. So honestly, if you need me to connect you with her, whatever, we can do that at some point. But yeah, we can get beaver meat. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that you have a beaver meat connection. You're truly legit in the pet industry, Tony.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I can put that on my title or not, but yeah, almost 16 years. I have a few connections.
Yeah.
And then you have to think that they've got to have leaky gut, because for these lists, to see these lists from these allergy tests, it's insane.
Yeah, I mean, leaky gut for sure. That's actually an interesting one, because if you look at most food allergies, both in humans and dogs, typically, like take egg allergies, for instance, like people who are allergic to eggs all tend to be deficient in one very specific family of Clostridia that is like a healthy type. Usually when people talk about Clostridia, it's like a bad thing, but there are healthy types of it too.
Sure.
So there's like a very, and this could be up to like 5 to 10% of the microbiome. Like it's actually like a very large part of it. So when you look at these kids and in humans, nobody has conclusively figured this out.
Yeah.
One theory is that like antibiotics in children are a cause of this. It would make a lot of sense, of course. But there's like, getting back to this egg allergy, like it's one specific family that is deficient in almost all cases. So what does that mean? One theory that I tend to think is possibly has merit is that this family of bacteria is actually involved in breaking down certain types of proteins in the microbiome before they're absorbed in the intestines, so into the bloodstream. So you can imagine that, like, okay, here are these proteins that like a normal person can eat, but they get broken down and then they're they enter our body. So you can imagine that, like, if they don't get broken down, like the body is viewing something very normal like eggs as like a very like odd external threat now. And so then they're sending this like immunoglobulin attack against it. And so it all starts to kind of make sense. So that's why this research is so early. Like microbiome research in general only started like 10 years ago, but it is going to be very interesting to see once they like really start to figure this out. And that's why I'm also very excited about things like, most people won't heard of protein folding, but it's like AI methods that are being used to like really understand the structure of proteins. And that's going to have a lot of benefits once we really figure that out, in terms of like really understanding what's causing food allergies. Maybe we can create, instead of medicine, we can create something basically new that can either help break those down or kind of like block their absorption. There are lots of ways you could potentially deal with it, but it's going to be a really interesting future. For now, it's just good to know, like, that's even possibly what is causing it. And I mean, it just comes back to like, we got to figure out what to avoid in our dog's diet ultimately. But that's why like digestive enzymes can potentially be helpful in these situations, because you're essentially hydrolyzing the dog food in your dog's body while it's in there.
So, and we need this research because, and I really think, to your point, and we won't get too far into it because I think that's a whole other episode, but the microbiome and everything going into that, and these fecal transplants and all that, I think we're just at the head of getting somewhere with all this. And we need this research because that's what the vets are telling people. That's why they want to feed Purina, because they have all these clinical studies, and that's what we're up against. Like that's what we in the retail space, the independent pet stores, we're up against that. Like, but the vet said, I have to feed Purina because, they have all these studies, whereas these smaller companies, but you do have, you're behind all your research. That's what we need to really make some headway. And I hate to say it for lack of a better word, but convince the average consumer that that's not the answer. What we're providing is the answer.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I think that the people who tend to feed their dog natural diets are people who have common sense. So it's like, you can look at it, you can look at all the science, and that's definitely interesting. But like, we can also use some common sense and just say like, okay, like all the fats are getting oxidized. The grinding machine, people are actually like feeding their dog stuff that is like being ground down, like highly processed. There are enough clinical studies on processed food at this point to like know for a fact that it is detrimental to your health. And also, like, I mean, one of the really interesting studies that is on our website shows how feeding a dog a natural diet versus dry kibble actually results in twice as much microbiome diversity. So to me, that's a fascinating study, because it just shows like it almost doesn't matter what you feed them as long as it's not dry kibble. And when you do feed your dog dry kibble, it's resulting in less microbiome diversity, which again, for people who are new to this sort of thing, like that is associated with longevity across every study. That's why it's the most important statistic in microbiome studies, because the microbiome diversity is like literally like fewer heart issues, fewer liver issues, lower obesity, lower diabetes, longer lives. So
Yep. And a lot of those kibble feeders don't even rotate proteins. I mean, we're still like telling that, like we still get the puzzled look like, what do you mean I should feed different proteins? You've got to at least rotate your proteins, different amino acids, different nutrient profile. There's so much to it. I get it. Some people are going to have to feed kibble, and I think kibble will never completely go away, but the goal is to, at least for those that can't afford it, to reduce the amount they're feeding and to get them to rotate their proteins within their kibble, right?
It's so sad. I'm actually running some Facebook ads for Yumwoof right now about rotating your proteins, because it's kind of one of our big brand messages that I want to bring forward right now. Because we just we launched like these 3 new hypoallergenic recipes. We have our original 2, and then we have perfect dog food mix to make that basically works with like any ground meat, like elk, even venison, all that stuff. So the whole like vision I've had around that is like, rotate your dog's proteins. And one is a bit of a funny, sad story is those are actually some of our worst performing Facebook ads right now. Nobody cares.
What?
And I'm just like, guys, like, please, like, understand it's so important and easy. Just like rotate your dog's proteins.
It's common sense, like you said. A dog would never eat the same thing. We would never eat the same thing day in and day out. We wouldn't pick the same cereal box off of the shelf.
Absolutely.
It's so, and that's marketing. That's how powerful fucking marketing is.
It is. And what I was going to say is that like a dog food manufacturer has zero incentive to convince you to do rotational feeding, because once you found a food that your dog likes and they appear to be healthy or just like it in general, you never want that customer to change their dog food again.
Nope.
Like what is changing food mean? It means you need to like go into your subscription system where it's like might be a bad customer experience. They're going to change their subscription. So it means that like, hey, they're there. Like they might decide at the very last minute, like maybe I'll just like cancel. Like there are all these reasons why a dog food company would never want you to rotate your diet. And unfortunately, just like the technology available to like manage your account that, we have to use is like, doesn't really make it easy. Like nobody is really building software to make rotational feeding for dogs easy. So maybe I'll have to go build that someday, but but I'm going to have to like message my developer right after this. But you look at the incentives, like even in a vet clinic, like, if someone has just started feeding Hills and their dog is eating it, they're a picky eater, and they're like, you know what, I know it's bad for my dog, but my dog will eat it. Like that vet is never going to tell you to try the beef recipe if you're feeding the chicken. Yep. So yeah, it's just, it all plays into like industry incentives, but it's been like a really common message for me in my reels lately on Instagram, because to me it's like something that's just not being spoken about, and it's so important because 15% of dogs are, and I know you're aware of this stat, but like many people aren't aware that 15% of dogs are allergic to chicken. A lot of people do know that that's a very high allergen. Yep. But what a lot of people don't know yet is that 15% of dogs are now allergic to beef. And that's only happened in the last 5 years. So we can ask ourselves why that is. And those are the two. People switched over from chicken after they learned about all those allergies. They switched over to beef. Now people are feeding their dog beef every day, and it's just as bad of an allergen. So, we can talk about like low allergen proteins, and like there's definitely the whole community out there about like hot and cold meats and stuff. But like just putting all that aside, maybe turkey, for instance, is 3% allergy. Only 3% of dogs are allergic to turkey. But like if we feed our dog turkey every day, it is going to cause an allergy. If we feed our dog, like fish is about 2%. But if we feed our dog only the same fish and we never rotate, that's also going to become 15%. So I hope that is like a message that people like really start to understand, because it means that later in your dog's life, you don't have to feed them Apoquil and like other type of like really serious medication that's bad for their kidneys.
Yep. And I mean, Apoquel has even been linked to cancer. But So here's what happens. So they find that one protein, let's just say it's turkey, and it fixes their dog. Then they're terrified to change. So right out of the gate, I usually say, okay, we made it this far, but you have to incorporate. We have to find at least one more protein. We're not going to switch yet, but at least in 3 months, we've got to try something else. And people are terrified to try something else. Terrified.
I am glad that they're trusting you as their guru through this process. We need more people like you encouraging people to rotate their dog's proteins.
We
like
do
even
need
people
more.
will rotate, like they'll be like, oh, for lunch I'm gonna feed this, and then for dinner I'm gonna feed that, and then they do that every day, and it's like, that's also not really helping. Like that is just that is probably better than like every meal the same, but it's still like really not going to prevent those food allergies long term. And yeah, like you said, and like I say a lot, it's, you know, it's like, just look at the human diet. It's like we really do switch it up all the time, every day. And our dogs like their number one thing in life, besides loving us, of course, is food. So many would argue that my dog Sherlock might even like food more than he loves me, but I hope that's not the case. He just is a really food obsessed dog. but you know, it's like, it's such an important part of their life. Yeah, we like don't even like. That's another reason why I really love poppers. Like I've like kind of gotten into that, just like keeping it fun for them. You know, a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is a good place, especially since your latest message is rotate, rotate, rotate. And I did see that come across my Instagram. I will try to share if I can. I'll talk to Sid about sharing all of a couple of your things on our page about your rotation, so that we can. So much. Absolutely. And you know, you talk about more people trying to preach this message. That's why I started the podcast, because right now I only have 3 stores in Pittsburgh, 1 in Florida. So my reach is not broad enough. So I felt the podcast would be the way to do it. So here we are.
Yeah. Well, I like getting into these, like, I like talking to people who aren't afraid to get into the serious stuff, like the controversial things, like, you know, I'm sure someday I'm sure you've already done a whole episode about DCM, but like, you know, just even beginning there, it's like, that's just the beginning of like so many other misconceptions that people have about like what should be in dog food. Definitely like not feeding the dry kibble is a good place to start. I'm 100% convinced that Purina has like a whole troll army they pay on Reddit. I forget if I was talking about this with you before, but like if you look at any Purina One feed on Reddit, you have these people who start defending it, and they always say the same thing. They always say that the food has highly digestible protein, and I'm like,
unbelievable.
Nobody talks like that. Like,
right.
Like
the average person
paid by Purina.
The average person does that. That is not their language, right?
Correct.
Yep.
So it's just so funny to me. Like, yeah, I mean, to some extent, protein digestibility is very important, but like nobody talks like that. It's clear that you're like being paid by Purina. That is the benefit of being like such a large brand with like, you know, when you have like really low costs because the ingredients you use are terrible, and then you have like really high margins because you sell through vet channels and sometimes even own them, so like you can take that margin and like pay for all sorts of marketing. So yeah, they definitely have an advantage there, but luckily more and more people are seeing through it. And
we should do a whole DCM episode because people are still stuck on it, and vets are still it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. And it's like, I'm always, it's always like, how much do I want to go take 30 minutes to explain something that you might not even understand through an email? But it does always break my heart when people, you know, bring the most simple thing up that is like even within DCM, like, you know, debate about it however you want. Grain free caused it, peas and legumes caused it, something was in the synthetic supplements, like literally nobody knows. But it's like, okay, well, we have like basically discredited, like even the FDA has discredited at this point, like that original statement that they made. So yeah, it's a very interesting debate, but it's like, it can be so frustrating when, you know, anytime like, you know, people who are like maybe not super read up on the topic find like the top Google result that's not the most recent research, and then just like extrapolate off of that. And yeah, I can't tell you how many people I'll talk with who say grains must be in my dog's diet. And I'm like, you're in luck, we got some grain recipes. But it's just like, oh man, like for your dog's sake, like please switch it up.
I literally just the other day was talking to a customer about it, and I said the FDA has refuted the study. They've pulled it. They can't find any conclusive evidence. Oh, well, I don't trust the FDA. I'm like,
no.
Meanwhile, I'm looking down at a lab that is a coffee table lab, and I just sometimes I just can't. Sometimes I just can't.
I'm not going to lie, okay. Tony, my mind is exploding right now for so many reasons.
All right. Jaron, what a great episode. I love that we've met. And please tell our listeners the name of your book, your food, your social handles. Tell us everything, and then we will sign off for this episode.
Absolutely. Well, it was really fun conversation. And my book is called The Canine Cocomega Effect. It's on Amazon. It's a very quick, easy read that is like really interesting science for all my data nerds and science nerds and dog health nerds out there. So if you've listened this long, you clearly are one of those people.
Yep.
But you know, I'm also Jaron Lucas on Instagram. You know, my company is Yumwoof, yumwoof.com. And yeah, we make, in my opinion, some of the best air dried food out there. But yeah, follow me on Instagram. I'm doing a lot of reels about different controversial dog related health topics.
They're great reels, and my food should be here any day, my sample that you sent me. So I'm very excited to try it with Layla, and I will share the feedback. And thanks everyone for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.